I'm Teresa, 32, and I never thought my perfect marriage would turn into a nightmare when Michael and I moved in with his parents to save for our dream home. His mother Margaret seemed supportive, always bringing me tea before bed, but lately I've been feeling strange, tired with gaps in my memory that worried me. Then came that evening when I walked into the kitchen early and saw something that made my heart stop. Margaret was crushing pills into my nightly tea. Instead of confronting her, I made a split-second decision that saved my life. I pretended to drink it. I pretended to sleep. If you're watching this, please like and subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from. What I discovered that night changed everything. The day I married Michael was everything I had dreamed of. The sun shone brightly over the outdoor venue, flowers bloomed all around us, and my heart felt full to bursting as I walked down the aisle toward my future husband. His smile was radiant, and I remember thinking I was the luckiest woman alive. His family had welcomed me with open arms, especially his mother Margaret, who had helped plan our perfect day down to the smallest detail. Michael and I had dated for 2 years before he proposed. We met at a charity fundraiser where I was representing my marketing firm. He was charming, intelligent, and seemed to value the same things I did. Our relationship progressed naturally, and by the time he proposed, I was certain we were meant to be together forever. After the wedding, we made what seemed like a practical decision. Housing prices in our area were skyrocketing, and Michael suggested we move in with his parents temporarily to save money for our dream home. His parents lived in a spacious colonial house with plenty of room for us, and Margaret insisted she would love the company. "It just makes financial sense, Teresa," Michael had explained. "We could save enough for a substantial down payment within a year. My parents have that big guest suite on the second floor, so we'll still have our privacy." The arrangement seemed ideal. I was doing well in my career as a marketing executive, and Michael was steadily climbing the corporate ladder at his firm. Together, our incomes would allow us to save quickly while still living comfortably. Margaret welcomed us with enthusiasm, turning the guest suite into a cozy retreat for us. She even stocked the adjoining bathroom with my favorite toiletries and placed fresh flowers on the dresser. In those first few weeks, she went out of her way to make me feel at home, often bringing me chamomile tea in the evenings when I returned from work tired. "A good night's sleep is essential," she would say, placing the steaming mug on my nightstand. "This blend will help you relax after those stressful days at the office." I appreciated these small gestures and tried to reciprocate her kindness. But as the weeks passed, I began to notice subtle changes in the household dynamic. Margaret would call Michael multiple times during the day while he was at work, something I found unusual for a grown man. When we had dinner together as a family, she would often serve his favorite dishes and reminisce about his childhood, sometimes speaking as if I wasn't present. "Remember when you were little, Michael, and you said you would never leave your mother? You were such a devoted son," she would say, her eyes misty with nostalgia, while completely ignoring my presence at the table. Michael seemed oblivious to these small boundary violations, often chuckling and patting his mother's hand affectionately. "Mom loves to tell her stories," he would explain to me later. "It makes her happy to remember." Despite these minor irritations, I continued making efforts to build a good relationship with Margaret. I invited her shopping, helped with gardening, and even asked for her recipes to show my interest in family traditions. Sometimes these activities went well, and I felt we were making progress. Other times, she would make subtle comments about how different Michael and I were, implying that I might not understand his needs the way she did. "Michael has always needed his space when he gets home from work," she once told me as I waited for him in the living room. When he was growing up, I made sure no one bothered him for at least an hour after he came home. It might be why he seems distant when you try to talk to him right away. These comments stung, but I brushed them aside, attributing them to a mother's overprotectiveness. What concerned me more was the strange fatigue I began experiencing about 3 months into our stay. Initially, I blamed my demanding job and the adjustment to married life. But the tiredness became more profound, and I started experiencing memory lapses that frightened me. There were mornings when I couldn't remember getting into bed the night before. Sometimes entire conversations with Michael would vanish from my memory, leading to uncomfortable moments when he would reference something I had apparently agreed to, but had no recollection of discussing. "You said it was fine for me to go on that fishing trip with Dad next weekend," he insisted during one such conversation. "I did. When did we talk about that?" I asked, genuinely confused. Michael's face had darkened with impatience. "Last night, Teresa. We talked about it for nearly half an hour. You even suggested I take the new fishing rod we got as a wedding gift. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't recall this conversation. These incidents became more frequent, leaving me disoriented and increasingly anxious. When I mentioned my concerns to Michael, he dismissed them as stress-related. "You work too hard," he said. "Maybe you should consider cutting back your hours." I tried reducing my workload and going to bed earlier, but the fatigue and memory issues persisted. Something didn't feel right, but I couldn't pinpoint what was wrong. The loving home I thought I had married into was beginning to feel strange and unwelcoming. Little did I know that my instincts were trying to warn me of the danger lurking beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect family arrangement. The night everything changed started like any other. I had been feeling particularly unwell that day, with a pounding headache and the now familiar brain fog that had been plaguing me for weeks. My concentration at work had suffered so badly that I decided to leave early, something I rarely did as a dedicated professional. "Are you sure you're okay to drive?" My assistant Jen had asked, concern evident in her voice. "You look really pale." "I'll be fine," I assured her, though I wasn't entirely convinced myself. "I just need to lie down." The drive home was difficult. I had to focus intently on the road, fighting the heaviness in my eyelids and the strange disconnected feeling that had become my constant companion. When I arrived at the house, I noticed that only Margaret's car was in the driveway. Michael was likely still at work, and his father often spent afternoons at his golf club. I entered quietly through the side door, planning to go straight upstairs to rest. As I passed the kitchen, I heard the sound of a mortar and pestle, the grinding noise distinct and purposeful. Curious, I slowed my steps and peered around the doorframe. What I saw froze me in place. Margaret stood at the counter, her back partially to me, focused intently on grinding something in the small stone mortar. Beside her was my usual teacup steam rising from its surface. As I watched, she carefully tapped a fine powder from the mortar into the tea, stirring it thoroughly until it dissolved completely. My heart began to race as realization dawned. Those weren't herbal supplements or harmless additives. The furtive way she glanced around before pouring the powder, the care she took to ensure it dissolved without a trace. This was deliberate and secretive. I drew back quickly before she could spot me, my mind racing. The fatigue, the memory lapses, the increasing brain fog. Suddenly it all made terrible sense. Margaret had been drugging me potentially for months. The betrayal cut deep, stealing my breath and sending cold waves of fear through my body. My first instinct was to confront her, to storm into the kitchen and demand answers. But some deeper survival instinct held me back. If she had been secretly drugging me, who knew what else she might be capable of, and why? What possible motive could my mother-in-law have for systematically drugging her son's wife? I needed answers, but confrontation would only alert her that I knew. Instead, a plan formed quickly in my mind. I would pretend to drink the tea as usual, pretend to fall under its influence, and then remain asleep to discover what happened next. Only then might I learn the full extent of what was happening in this house. Taking a deep breath, I retreated silently to the front door. I opened and closed it loudly, announcing my presence with a called-out greeting. "Hello, anyone home?" I heard quick movements in the kitchen. Then Margaret appeared in the hallway, all smiles and warm welcome. There was no sign of the calculating woman I had witnessed moments before. "Teresa dear, you're home early," she said, her tone perfectly calibrated to sound surprised but pleased. "I wasn't feeling well," I explained, watching her face carefully. Did I detect a flicker of concern in her eyes, or was it calculation? "Oh, you poor thing. Why don't you go upstairs and change into something comfortable? I was just making some tea. I'll bring you a cup to help you relax." The offer sent chills down my spine. The very tea I had watched her tamper with was now being offered as a remedy for my illness, an illness she herself had likely been causing. "That would be lovely, Margaret. Thank you," I managed to say, keeping my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Upstairs, I changed quickly, my hands shaking with a combination of fear and anger. I arranged the bed to look inviting and comfortable, knowing I would need to put on a convincing performance. When Margaret knocked lightly on the door, I had composed myself enough to face her. "Here you are, dear," she said, placing the teacup on my nightstand. "This will help you sleep. You really don't look well." "Oh, thank you," I replied, taking the cup. "You're always so thoughtful." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "That's what family is for." I waited until she left the room before examining the tea closely. It looked normal, a light amber liquid with steam curling from its surface. But now I knew better. This seemingly innocent cup contained something that had been stealing my autonomy, my clarity, perhaps even putting my health at serious risk. The internal struggle was intense. I needed to appear to drink it while actually disposing of it. With careful movements, I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and poured most of the tea down the drain, leaving just enough in the cup to be convincing. I ran the water to wash away any evidence, then returned to the bedroom with the nearly empty cup. I settled onto the bed, placed the cup on the nightstand with a small amount of liquid still visible in the bottom, and positioned myself as if I had fallen asleep after drinking most of it. My heart pounded so loudly I feared Margaret might hear it if she returned to check on me. And now began the hardest part, waiting, listening, pretending to be unconscious, while remaining acutely aware. I steadied my breathing, kept my body relaxed, and prepared to discover what sinister purpose lay behind my mother-in-law's actions. I know. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours. As I lay motionless on the bed, my breath deliberately slow and even. I fought against my natural instinct to tense up, to run, to confront. Instead, I remained perfectly still, my eyes closed but my mind hyper-alert. I heard Margaret's footsteps approaching about 20 minutes after she had left me with the tea. The door creaked open slowly. Through my barely open eyelids, I could see her silhouette in the doorway watching me. She stepped into the room, her movements careful and measured. "Teresa," she called softly. When I didn't respond, she called again, slightly louder. "Teresa, can you hear me?" I maintained my even breathing, forcing my facial muscles to remain slack. Margaret approached the bed and picked up the teacup, noting with apparent satisfaction that most of the liquid was gone. She set it back down and then did something that sent ice through my veins. She reached out and shook my shoulder firmly at first, then with increasing vigor. "Teresa," the pretense of gentleness was gone from her voice now. She was testing to see if I was truly unconscious. I let my head loll slightly with her movements, keeping my body limp and unresponsive. Years of childhood theatre classes finally served a vital purpose as I gave the performance of my life. Seemingly satisfied that I was completely out, Margaret pulled her phone from her pocket. My pulse quickened, but I maintained my facade of drugged sleep. She dialed a number and waited, turning away from the bed to look out the window. "Michael," she said after a moment. Her voice entirely different now, clipped businesslike. "It's done. She came home early today, but it worked out perfectly. She's completely out." My husband's name in this context sent a wave of nausea through me. Michael was involved. My own husband knew about this. "Yes, everything's going according to plan," Margaret continued. "The documentation is all prepared. Dr. Winters assured me there would be no issues with the commitment once we bring her in." Commitment. The word echoed in my mind like a death knell. They were planning to commit me somewhere, presumably a psychiatric facility. The realization was so shocking I nearly gave myself away with a gasp, but somehow maintained my facade. "I've been gathering the evidence just like we discussed," Margaret went on. "I have photos of her wandering around confused documents from when she missed those meetings at work that she doesn't remember. The prescription bottles will help too. We can say she's been self-medicating and hiding it." I felt sick. They had been building a case against me using my symptoms they caused, to paint me as mentally unstable. "Don't worry about her savings, you are sweet," Margaret said in response to something Michael had asked. "Once the commitment papers are signed, you'll have access as her husband. The power of attorney documents are ready too. She trusted you completely, which makes this all so much easier." The betrayal cut so deep I could barely breathe through the pain. My husband of less than a year had been conspiring with his mother to have me committed to steal my savings. The money I had worked so hard to accumulate over years of dedicated work. "Tomorrow morning will be perfect," Margaret continued. "The facility is expecting us. Dr. Winters said to bring her in while she's still disoriented from the medication. That way she won't make a scene." There was a pause as she listened to something Michael was saying. "No, I don't think we need to worry about her parents interfering. You said they live across the country, and she hasn't been close with them since that argument last Christmas, right? By the time they find out, everything will be legally settled." Another pause. "Of course I'm being careful with the dosage. I'm not an idiot, Michael. I've been a nurse for 30 years. She won't remember anything from tonight, just like all the other times." This new piece of information struck me hard. Margaret was a nurse. She had professional knowledge about medications and dosages. She knew exactly what she was doing to me and how to do it without leaving evidence. "Come home soon," she said, her voice softening slightly. "We should go over the final details tonight. Her behavior has been erratic enough lately that no one will question this. Everyone at her office has noticed thanks to those doses I've been putting in her morning coffee. My morning coffee too." The extent of their plot was becoming clearer. They had been systematically drugging me at multiple points throughout the day, ensuring I would appear increasingly unstable to everyone around me. "I'll start packing some of her things," Margaret concluded. "Just the bare essentials for the facility. We can deal with the rest of her stuff later." She ended the call and stood looking down at me for a long moment. I felt her gaze like a physical weight, but kept my breathing steady. Finally, she left the room, closing the door behind her. Only when I was certain she was gone did I allow a single tear to escape from beneath my closed eyelids. My husband and his mother were planning to institutionalize me tomorrow morning. They had been drugging me for months, documenting my resulting confusion and preparing legal documents to take control of my assets. I had less than 12 hours to figure out how to escape and gather enough evidence to protect myself, and I would have to do it all while continuing to pretend I was unconscious from the drugs they thought I had consumed. The sound of Margaret's car starting in the driveway gave me my first opportunity. She was likely going to pick up Michael. I didn't know how long they would be gone, but I had to act quickly. As soon as the car pulled away, I leapt from the bed, adrenaline coursing through my veins. First, I needed evidence. I grabbed my phone from my purse and took photos of the teacup with its residue, though I knew this alone wouldn't be enough to prove what had happened. I needed to find the pills themselves, the documentation Margaret had mentioned, anything that could corroborate my story. I started in the master bathroom where Margaret and my father-in-law kept their medications. My hands shook as I sifted through the cabinet, finding nothing unusual. Then I checked under the sink, behind towels, everywhere I could think of. Nothing. Next, I moved to Margaret's home office, a small room off the main hallway she used for paying bills and family paperwork. I rifled through drawers, careful to leave everything appearing untouched. In the bottom drawer of her desk, locked but easily opened with a letter opener, I found what I was looking for. There, tucked beneath tax documents, was a prescription bottle without a patient label. The medication inside matched the description of a powerful sedative I recognized from a television documentary. I photographed it from multiple angles, capturing the pills themselves and the partial pharmaceutical label. Digging deeper, I found more bottles, some with different medications. A chill ran through me as I realized the sophisticated cocktail of drugs that had likely been flowing through my system. I documented everything meticulously. In a manila folder labeled Family Medical, I discovered something even more disturbing. There were admission papers for Lakewood Psychiatric Hospital with my name already filled in. The listed symptoms included paranoid delusions, memory loss, erratic behavior, and potential self-harm risk. The papers needed only a doctor's signature to complete. Next to these was a power of attorney document partially completed that would give Michael control over all my financial affairs in the event I was deemed mentally incapacitated. My hands trembled so badly I could barely hold my phone steady to photograph these papers. In another folder, I found printed photos. My stomach lurched as I flipped through them. There I was, looking confused in our kitchen. Here was another of me, apparently talking to myself in the garden. In each, I looked disheveled and disoriented, obviously taken when I was under the influence of whatever they had been giving me. I had just finished photographing these when I heard a sound that made my blood freeze. A car pulling into the driveway. They were back much sooner than I had anticipated. I quickly returned everything to its exact position, locked the drawer, and slipped out of the office. I was halfway up the stairs when the front door opened. Heart pounding, I raced the rest of the way up as quietly as possible and slid back into bed, assuming the same position as before. I had barely settled when I heard footsteps on the stairs. "She's still in the bedroom," I heard Margaret say. "The dose I gave her should keep her out until morning." "Good," Michael replied, his voice sending a fresh wave of pain through me. This was the man I had loved, had married, had planned to build a life with. "Did you call Dr. Winters again to confirm?" "Yes, he's expecting us at 9 tomorrow. He said to bring her in whatever state she's in. They're prepared to handle her if she becomes agitated." Their footsteps passed my door, continuing down the hall to their respective rooms. I remained perfectly still, my mind racing. I now had evidence, but I was still trapped in this house with two people who were planning to institutionalize me in the morning. I needed to escape, but I had to wait until they were asleep. Moving too soon would alert them, and I had no doubt they had contingency plans if they thought their scheme was discovered. So I continued my charade, listening to the household sounds as evening turned to night. I heard them preparing and eating dinner, discussing their plans in hushed tones. Margaret's voice drifted up occasionally, reviewing details with Michael. "Remember, if she wakes up confused, just be gentle but firm. Tell her she needs help, that you're taking her somewhere safe." "And if she resists?" Michael asked. "The papers include permission for sedation if necessary. Dr. Winters left me something stronger just in case. But I don't think we'll need it. The way I've been building up the dosage in her system, she'll be too disoriented to put up much of a fight. The clinical way they discussed drugging me further sent shivers down my spine. These people were strangers to me now, dangerous strangers who had been systematically poisoning me for months. Eventually, the house grew quiet. I heard Michael check on me once more before bed, opening the door slightly, and then closing it after apparently satisfying himself that I was still unconscious. Then came the sound of his shower running, followed by the creak of his bed as he settled in for the night. I waited another 2 hours watching the clock on my phone beneath the covers to track the time. By 3 a.m, the house was completely silent except for the distant sound of my father-in-law's snoring. Now was my chance. I had to gather my essentials and leave without waking anyone. Moving with deliberate slowness to avoid any noise, I slid from the bed and began the most important escape of my life. The floorboard near the closet creaked slightly as I stepped on it, freezing me in place. I held my breath, listening intently for any sign that the noise had disturbed the sleeping household. After 30 agonizing seconds of silence, I continued my careful movements. I needed to take only what was absolutely essential: my purse with wallet and identification, my phone and charger, a small bag with a change of clothes. Everything else could be replaced, but these items were crucial for my escape and subsequent survival. As I gathered these items, the gravity of my situation pressed down on me. I was about to leave my marriage, my home, and all sense of security behind. The betrayal by Michael cut deeper than any pain I had ever experienced. I had trusted him completely, had believed we were building a future together. Now I understood it had all been a calculated deception. I opened my jewelry box and removed only 2 items: my grandmother's necklace that had sentimental value, and a pair of diamond earrings I could sell if I needed emergency funds. Then in a moment that felt both devastating and liberating, I slipped my wedding ring from my finger and placed it on the dresser. The small clink it made as it touched the wooden surface seemed to echo the breaking of my heart. Just as I was zipping my small bag closed, I heard movement in the hallway. Footsteps approached my door, Michael's footsteps, which I recognized from their particular rhythm. My heart nearly stopped. Had he somehow sensed I was awake? Had Margaret installed some kind of monitor I hadn't discovered? With nowhere to run, I darted into the adjoining bathroom, closing the door almost completely, but leaving it open a crack so I could see into the bedroom. I pressed myself against the wall, clutching my bag to my chest to prevent any noise. The bedroom door opened, and Michael's silhouette appeared in the doorway. He stood there for a long moment, just watching what he thought was my sleeping form under the covers. I had arranged pillows to mimic my body's shape before moving to pack. Would he notice the deception? One more day, he whispered to himself so quietly I barely caught the words. And then it's over. The cold calculation in his voice made me shiver. This was not the man I married. Had he ever been real, or had it all been an act from the beginning? He closed the door again, and I heard him continue down the hall, to the kitchen based on the direction. Getting water, perhaps. I waited, barely breathing, until I heard him return to his room and the soft click of his door closing. That had been too close. I needed to leave immediately before anyone else stirred. With trembling hands, I gathered my things and crept to the bedroom door, easing it open with excruciating slowness to prevent any sound. The hallway was dark, illuminated only by a small nightlight near the stairs. I moved like a shadow, placing each foot with deliberate care on the parts of the floor I knew wouldn't creak. Years of late-night trips to the bathroom had taught me the safe path. Down the stairs, one careful step at a time, I descended into the foyer. The front door was out of the question, too noisy with its old hinges and chain lock. Instead, I headed for the side door off the kitchen, which I knew from experience opened silently. As I passed through the kitchen, I noticed Margaret's purse on the counter. On impulse, I quickly checked inside and found an unmarked pill bottle similar to the ones I had discovered in her office. I photographed it quickly, then returned it exactly as I had found it. Finally, I reached the side door. With one last glance back at what I had thought would be my home, for just a year, but had become my prison, I slipped outside into the cool night air. The sensation of freedom was immediate and overwhelming. I wanted to run to put as much distance between myself and that house as possible, but I forced myself to move carefully until I was well beyond earshot. Only when I reached the end of the block did I pull out my phone with shaking hands. There was only one person I could think to call at 3 a.m. who lived nearby and would help without question. "Jasmine," I whispered when she answered groggily. "I need help. Can I come to your place? I'll explain everything when I get there. but please don't tell anyone I called." To her eternal credit, my best friend asked no questions. "Of course. Do you need me to pick you up?" "No, I'm already on my way. I'll be there in 20 minutes. "And Jasmine?" "Thank you." I ended the call and began walking briskly toward her apartment complex about a mile away. With each step, the reality of what had happened, what had been happening for months, crashed over me in waves. The man I loved had been systematically drugging me with his mother's help. They had been documenting my resulting confusion and erratic behavior. They had planned to have me committed to a psychiatric facility and take control of my finances. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that it seemed almost unreal. Yet the evidence on my phone and the lingering brain fog from months of being drugged were undeniable proof. As I walked through the silent streets, tears streamed down my face. But beneath the pain and shock, something else was building: determination. They had underestimated me. They had nearly succeeded in their plan, but in the end their arrogance had been their downfall. They never imagined I would catch Margaret in the act. They never thought I would have the presence of mind to pretend to gather evidence to escape. By the time I reached Jasmine's apartment building, I had made a promise to myself. This would not break me. I would fight back, not just to protect myself, but to ensure they could never do this to anyone else. I looked back once more in the direction I had come toward the house where my husband slept, unaware that his carefully orchestrated plan had just collapsed. Tomorrow, when they came to my room with their gentle voices and firm hands, ready to take me to Lakewood Psychiatric Hospital, they would find only an empty bed and a wedding ring. I rang Jasmine's buzzer, and when her concerned face appeared at her door, I finally allowed myself to fully feel the magnitude of what had happened. As she wrapped her arms around me, I broke down completely, my body shaking with sobs of grief, betrayal, and relief at my narrow escape. "Oh my God, Teresa!" Jasmine gasped as I finished recounting everything that had happened. We sat on her couch, mugs of untouched tea growing cold on the coffee table before us. It was nearly 5 a.m, and I had just shared the entire horrifying story, showing her the evidence on my phone. I had known Jasmine since college. She was the maid of honor at my wedding and the person I trusted most in the world. The shock and outrage on her face validated my experience in a way I desperately needed. "We need to call the police," she said immediately, reaching for her phone. "Wait," I replied, placing my hand over hers. "I need to talk to a lawyer first. This is going to be complicated. Michael is well connected in this town, and Margaret worked at the hospital for decades. I need to make sure I approach this the right way." Jasmine nodded, though her expression remained fierce with protective anger. "First thing in the morning, then. My cousin is a lawyer. She specializes in family law. I'll call her as soon as it's a reasonable hour." The adrenaline that had carried me through the night was fading, leaving me shaking and exhausted. Jasmine noticed and immediately shifted into caretaker mode. "You need to rest," she insisted, guiding me to her guest room. "I'll stay awake in case your phone rings. If Michael or Margaret call, don't answer. We'll figure out next steps when you've had some sleep." Sleep seemed impossible, with my mind still racing, but my body was crashing from the stress and lingering effects of whatever drugs remained in my system. As soon as my head hit the pillow in Jasmine's spare room, darkness claimed me. I woke to Jasmine gently shaking my shoulder. The clock showed it was just past 9, the exact time Margaret and Michael had planned to take me to the psychiatric facility. The thought sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. "Teresa, I've got my cousin Alicia on the phone. She's coming over right now, but she wanted me to ask if you're okay with her bringing a friend who's a detective. She thinks we should get the police involved immediately." Still groggy but functioning on newfound determination, I nodded. "Yes, that's fine. And check my phone. Are there any messages?" Jasmine handed me my phone, her expression grim. 27 missed calls from Michael, 10 from Margaret. Voicemails, texts, they're freaking out. I scrolled through the messages, my hands trembling. "Teresa, where are you? Call me immediately. Honey, we're worried about you. Please come home. Your condition is making you paranoid. We just want to help you. Whatever you think is happening isn't real. The medications the doctor prescribed are affecting your thinking. The gaslighting was so blatant it would have been almost comical if it weren't so terrifying." They were already setting up their defense, claiming I was delusional, that any accusations I made were the product of my condition. Alicia arrived within the hour, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, with a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. With her was Detective Ramirez, a serious woman who listened intently as I recounted my story again. "The first thing we need to do is document the drugs in your system," Detective Ramirez said when I finished. We need a toxicology screening immediately before whatever they've been giving you metabolizes completely. Within 2 hours, I had been to the hospital for blood and hair samples. The hair analysis would show a pattern of drugging over time, Ramirez explained, while the blood test would reveal what was currently in my system. Alicia, meanwhile, had begun preparing emergency restraining orders against both Michael and Margaret. Based on the evidence you've collected and the toxicology screening, we have a strong case, she assured me. The photographs of the pill bottles, the documentation for the psychiatric facility, the power of attorney papers. It all points to a calculated plan. As we left the hospital, my phone rang again. Michael. This time Alicia nodded for me to answer, but put it on speaker. Teresa, where are you? His voice sounded frantic, but I could hear the underlying calculation. We've been worried sick. You weren't in bed this morning. I'm safe, I replied, keeping my voice steady. That's all you need to know. Honey, you're not well. You've been confused lately forgetting things. We have a doctor's appointment today to help you. Please come home so we can take care of you. The false concern in his voice made my skin crawl. Detective Ramirez was recording the conversation, nodding encouragingly for me to keep him talking. What kind of Dr. Michael would that be at Lakewood Psychiatric Hospital? There was a pause, just a beat too long. How did you know about that? See, this is what I mean. You're confused. We've discussed this appointment several times. Like the fishing trip with your dad that I supposedly agreed to but couldn't remember? Another pause. Teresa, you're not making sense. Where are you? I'll come get you. Why don't you ask your mother what she's been putting in my tea every night? Or in my coffee every morning? What are you talking about? His voice had changed now, hardening with the first hints of anger. My mother has been nothing but kind to you. This paranoia is exactly why you need help. Goodbye, Michael. Don't try to contact me again. My lawyer will be in touch. I ended the call, my whole body shaking. Alicia squeezed my shoulder supportively. That was perfect, Detective Ramirez said. He's already building his defense, but he made several mistakes in that conversation that support your account. By late afternoon, the preliminary toxicology report had come back. The hospital found significant traces of 2 different sedatives in my system, along with an antipsychotic medication that was known to cause memory issues as a side effect. The hair analysis would take longer, but would likely show a pattern of these substances over time. Armed with this evidence, Detective Ramirez obtained a warrant. By evening, both Michael and Margaret had been taken into custody for questioning. I watched from Jasmine's apartment as the local news reported their arrest. The camera showed Margaret being led to a police car, her face a mask of indignation. Michael followed, looking stunned as if he couldn't believe his plan had failed so completely. This isn't over, Alicia warned me as we switched off the television. They'll hire good lawyers. Margaret will use her nursing background to claim she was giving you approved medications for a condition she'll invent. Michael will claim he was acting on medical advice out of concern for your well-being. But we have evidence, I protested. We do, she agreed. And it's strong, but be prepared for a fight. What followed was exactly that, a fight. The police investigation uncovered more than we initially expected. Another woman came forward, Michael's ex-girlfriend from 3 years earlier. She described experiencing similar symptoms while living with him, though she had moved away before their plan could fully materialize. Margaret's nursing license became a central focus. She had been disciplined once before for medication discrepancies at the hospital where she worked, though the case had been settled quietly. Several former colleagues came forward with suspicions they had never reported. Most damning was Dr. Winters, the psychiatrist, who had agreed to admit me. When confronted with the evidence, he admitted that Margaret had approached him, describing her increasingly unstable daughter-in-law months earlier, laying the groundwork for my eventual commitment. Through it all, I struggled with the aftermath of prolonged drugging. My parents flew in from Arizona to support me, devastated by what had happened and riddled with guilt for not recognizing something was wrong during our video calls. You seem tired, distracted, my mother said, tears in her eyes. We thought it was just the stress of a new marriage, a demanding job. We should have known better. There's no way you could have known, I assured them, though I struggled with my own feelings of foolishness for not recognizing the danger sooner. The divorce proceedings began immediately and were contentious. Michael's attorney attempted to paint me as mentally unstable, claiming the medications were necessary for my well-being. But the evidence was overwhelming, and when the complete hair analysis showed increasing levels of sedatives going back at least 6 months, his defense crumbled. I learnt during the proceedings that Michael had accumulated significant gambling debts before our marriage. My savings, nearly $300,000 set aside for our dream home, had been his target all along. Margaret, pathologically devoted to her son, had helped orchestrate the entire plan. The legal battles dragged on for months. There were days when I could barely function, when the trauma of the betrayal and the lingering effects of the drugs left me unable to get out of bed. But I had support. Jasmine, my parents, a therapist who specialized in trauma, and eventually a support group for survivors of domestic abuse. 6 months after that night, when I caught Margaret drugging my tea, both she and Michael were convicted. The charges included assault, conspiracy, attempted fraud, and practicing medicine without a license. Margaret received the heavier sentence due to her abuse of medical knowledge. As I sat in the courtroom and heard the judge deliver their sentences, I felt no joy, only a profound sadness for what might have been, and relief that they could never harm me or anyone else again. 2 years have passed since that night that changed everything. The path to healing hasn't been easy or straightforward. There were days, especially in the beginning, when the pain was so acute I could barely breathe through it. The betrayal by Michael cut deeper than any physical wound could have. This was the man I had loved, had trusted with my life and future. Learning that it had all been a calculated deception designed to take advantage of me shook my faith in my own judgment. The physical recovery was challenging too. My body had been subjected to a cocktail of powerful medications for months. The withdrawal symptoms were severe. Migraines, tremors, intense anxiety, and insomnia plagued me for weeks. My doctor explained that my system had become dependent on the drugs and needed time to rebalance. Your brain chemistry has been altered without your consent, she explained gently. Healing will take time, but it will happen. My parents stayed with me for the first month after everything happened. They rented a small apartment near Jasmine's building and created a safe space for me to begin rebuilding my life. Their unconditional support meant everything, especially on the days when I questioned whether I would ever feel normal again. You survived something that would have broken many people. My father told me one evening as we sat on the balcony watching the sunset, that strength comes from within you. It was always there. Therapy became a cornerstone of my recovery. Twice a week, I sat across from Dr. Lillian Carter, unpacking not just the trauma of what Michael and Margaret had done, but also examining how I had missed the red flags. It wasn't about blame, it was about understanding and growth. Manipulators like Michael are experts at what they do, Dr. Carter reminded me. They select victims carefully, love bomb them, isolate them gradually, and undermine their confidence so subtly that it's nearly impossible to recognize until you're deeply entangled. Through therapy, I came to understand that Michael had targeted me specifically for my financial stability, my somewhat distant relationship with my family, and what he perceived as a trusting nature that could be exploited. The knowledge was painful but empowering. It meant I could learn to recognize these patterns in the future. 3 months after the arrests, I joined a support group for survivors of intimate partner abuse. The stories I heard there helped me understand that I wasn't alone, that many intelligent, strong people had been deceived by those they trusted most. Abuse doesn't always look like bruises, one woman said during a session that particularly resonated with me. Sometimes it looks like gaslighting, isolation, and manipulation, and it's no less damaging for being invisible to others. The divorce was finalized 8 months after I escaped. My attorney, Alicia, fought fiercely to ensure I received everything I was entitled to, though money had ceased to be my primary concern. What mattered more was severing all legal ties to Michael and ensuring both he and Margaret could never come near me again. Rebuilding my career took time as well. The months of drugging had affected my performance at work, and though my company was supportive once they understood what had happened, I ultimately decided I needed a fresh start. 1 year after everything happened, I accepted a position with a marketing firm in a different city 60 miles away from the memories that haunted the streets of my old neighborhood. Moving was cathartic. I found a small house with a garden, something entirely my own that had no connection to my past life. I painted the walls in bright, cheerful colors and filled the space with plants. Each decision I made about my new home was a reclamation of my autonomy, a step toward healing. Gradually, I began to trust again. First my therapist, then the members of my support group, eventually new colleagues and neighbors. I approached relationships with caution, but refused to let fear dictate my life. The walls I built were not to shut people out completely, but to ensure I had healthy boundaries and the discernment to recognize warning signs. Dating again seemed impossible for a long time. The thought of being vulnerable with someone new terrified me. But 18 months after my divorce, I met Daniel through a community garden project. Our relationship developed slowly, built on honest communication and mutual respect. When I finally shared my full story with him, his response was everything I needed. Compassion without pity, anger on my behalf, without making it about him. "Thank you for trusting me with this," he said simply. "It helps me understand your boundaries better." The legal case against Michael and Margaret concluded with them both serving prison sentences. I attended their sentencings not out of vengeance, but as a final step in my healing journey. Seeing them held accountable helped me release some of the anger I had carried. Perhaps the most profound change has been my relationship with myself. I've learned to trust my instincts again, to value my perceptions and feelings. I've reclaimed my physical health through nutrition and gentle exercise. Most importantly, I've forgiven myself for not seeing what was happening sooner. Today, as I sit in my garden, watching butterflies visit the flowers I planted, I reflect on how far I've come. The pain hasn't disappeared entirely. I don't think it ever will, but it no longer defines me. I am not just a survivor of betrayal. I am a woman who rebuilt her life on her own terms. If my story teaches anything, it's the importance of trusting your instincts when something feels wrong. It's about maintaining your independence, even within intimate relationships. It's about creating a support network of people who truly care about your well-being. I still have moments of sadness for the life I thought I would have, but those moments are balanced by gratitude for the life I've created instead. One built on authentic connections, self-knowledge, and hard-won wisdom. For anyone listening who might recognize elements of my story in their own life, please know that you deserve better. Trust those internal alarm bells when they ring. Reach out for help. There is life beyond betrayal, and it can be beautiful in ways you never imagined. What relationship red flags have you noticed in your own life, or the lives of those close to you? Have you ever trusted your instincts and discovered you were right to be concerned? Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your intuition is one of the most powerful tools you possess. Trust it.